Good day, my name is Eric, and this is then the last episode of the first two chapters of Future Israel, a faith fictional story that originated in 2002 as Royal Israel. Today we go on a boat cruise on the former Dead Sea, but I spend a lot of time discussing some Israeli heroes and Temple Mount stuff. As from next week, I won't be reading the story, but I'll discuss the issues the story deals with. For example, the title for next week's video is The Authorized Millennial Version of the Bible. Imagine a future Bible that has been divinely corrected to teach the nations during the Messianic millennium. Okay, that said, let's get into the last bit of the story. The narrator and his wife are attending a wedding at the Dead Sea and end the day by going on a sunset boat cruise. Right, let's go with cruising on the Eliyahu. Being one of the popular new tourist destinations in the kingdom, a fleet of 6 sparkling new white and blue cabin cruisers lined the jetty. The names of the boats fascinated me. Anchored first in line was the Motta Gur, with the General Dayan second, a black eye patch decorating the name. Next were the Aluf Shlomo Goren and the Rabbi Salman Zoref. Our cruiser was the Eliyahu Golomb, named after the ship that, together with the Dov Hoz, famously sailed from Italy into Haifa in 1946, carrying more than 1,000 Jewish survivors of the Holocaust. The real Eliyahu Golomb and Dov Hoz were comrades in organizing the Hagadah, the underground organization for the defense of the kibbutz settlements between 1920 and the Second World War. Dov Hoz was also an aviation pioneer in Israel and a leader of Zionist labor. General Dayan is famous for having routed the Egyptians across the Sinai and the Suez Canal during the Six-Day War. But I had to scratch my head a little bit about Motta Gur. The parabat wings under his name gave me the clue I needed. He was the first paratrooper to reach the Temple Mount when they liberated the old city on June 7, 1967. Rabbi Zoref was a Jewish pioneer who returned to Jerusalem in 1811 with strong faith in the future restoration of Israel. He even sent one of his 10 sons out to locate the lost tribes and bring them back, as if any man could do what only the Almighty can. Zoref in turn inspired Theodor Herzl to publish Der Judenstaat in 1896 in Vienna, which resulted in the first Zionist Congress in Basel a year later on. 200 years and 10 generations later on, Zoref's great-grandson, Gershon Solomon, became the founder of the Temple Mount Faithful. Aluf Shlomo Goren was the IDF's chief chaplain who caused a commotion when he and 50 followers in August 1967 held a service on the Temple Mount. Goren contested that the northern section was not part of Solomon's original Temple Mount and therefore defied a ban for Jews not to go on the mount. Basing his measurements on the writings of Josephus, Maimonides, and Saida Gaon, Goren rightly argued that a moat north of the Temple Mount was enclosed by Herod when he expanded it from 17 to 35 acres in a 40-year period between 20 BC and 26 AD. Rabbi Goren's views were hugely unpopular, as was General Dayan's, when the general handed control of the Temple Mount back to the Muslims following the liberation of the city. This too came to pass, I thought, as we gingerly walked across the plank onto the boat. The cruiser soon headed out to sea, its powerful motors churning the lovely blue water, leaving a white foam trail behind it. pushing a huge bow wave in which 4 dolphins, tame survivors from an aquarium, soon began to entertain us. Palm trees and row upon rows of hotels and apartments soon diminished on the western shore as we reached the middle of Yam Chayim. A pleasant breeze in the balmy late afternoon heat made it spectacularly beautiful. Round us were numerous fishing boats. Seabirds swirled around the masts and bobbed up and down on the gentle swell, dunking in for snippets of fish. It was amazing to see how the northern part of the former Dead Sea now has abundant fish, mainly the result of the miracle water from the River of Life, supplemented by the Red Sea Desalination Project to keep the water level steady at around 385 meters below sea level. Several wadis cascading into the lake also contribute to the change in its saline content, from 30% up to an almost normal 8%. The water level has risen about 40 meters from what it was in 2025, back to 1950 levels, and the lake's volume is again up from 400 miles to 590 square miles, with a shoreline of over 86 miles. We were actually very familiar with everything we saw, having watched hours and hours of documentaries about the amazing developments at the world's lowest point. Our attention turned to the eastern shore, and in the distance was Mount Moab and a new resort named after Ruth, the valley of Moab's famous resident. It is to recall her inclusion into Israel's kingly line. The step Queen Maqdela of Sheba equaled 5 generations later on, resulting in the preservation of the Solomonic dynasty, as promised to King David, but hidden in Africa, south of the rivers of Cush, as Zechariah 3:10 foresaw. The inclusion of the nations in the redemption plan was what the Apostle Paul called the mystery, kept secret since the world began, but now made manifest, when he explained that Yeshua had become a servant to the circumcision, the Jews, in order to confirm the promises made to the patriarchs, and that the Gentiles, the pagans, may glorify the Almighty for his mercy, as we read in Romans 15:25-26 and 8-9, Ephesians 1:9-10. Look what a fantastic view they have, I told my wife, and gave her the binoculars the ship provides. In the distance we could see Ein Bokek with its intensive fish breeding farms to replenish the stock and meet the enormous demand for Yam Chayim's fish. And so we enjoyed cruising on what was once the Dead Sea, taking in the sight of birds and aquatic life in which used to be totally lifeless. The sun was setting and the boat turned back to the jetty into the breeze. The captain turned the throttle open and a faint fresh spray caught our faces every now and then as the boat plowed through the swells of silvery water. The sky turned into a spectacular palette of yellow and orange. It was the end of another perfect day in royal Israel. Right, regarding the Queen of Sheba and the Solomonic dynasty, in my footnote I say, the Queen of the South, Maqdela, the Queen of Sheba, was mentioned by Yeshua in Matthew 12:42. A visit to Solomon, who reigned from 977 to 937 before Christ, started a Solomonic dynasty with his son Menelik I in around 950 BC. Sheba was Abraham's grandson from Keturah. Thank you for watching. Next week, we start with the authorized millennial version of the Bible. I think you'll find it interesting. Shalom.